Have you ever heard a story and it just like sticks with you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the one we're going to unpack today, the story of Abraham and Isaac,
Yeah.
that's one of those for me, you know?
Totally.
It's about faith, but it's also about like a request that feels impossible.
Right.
And then things take a turn, and it just makes you think,
Yeah.
we're going deep on this one today.
Yeah. This account of Abraham and Isaac, it's not just an old story.
Right.
There's so much to it, you know?
Totally.
We've been looking at a lesson that really digs into the details.
Yeah.
And what we want to do today is pull out the big ideas
Right.
so you can understand what it's really all about
Exactly.
without getting bogged down.
Yeah.
In the ancient world,
Right. Right.
we're talking about trust, you know,
Uh-huh.
and provision.
Yeah.
Really deep stuff.
It is. Our sources lay it all out, like
Yeah.
those huge promises that God made to Abraham.
Uh-huh.
And then, boom, he's hit with this crazy test of faith.
That's right.
It really gets under your skin, you know?
Does.
It makes you think about what faith really means.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start with those promises,
Yeah.
those initial ones that set everything in motion.
Yeah. So God made 3 major promises to Abram,
Okay.
who later became Abraham.
Right.
First was the promise of land, the land of Canaan.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be an everlasting inheritance for his descendants.
Wow, so a permanent home.
Yeah, a promised land. And that idea,
Yeah,
you know, it just runs through the whole story.
that's amazing.
It really does.
Okay, so land for generations to come.
Yeah.
What else did God promise?
So the second promise, that was about offspring.
Okay.
God told Abram he would have more descendants than he could count,
Wow.
like the stars in the sky
Right.
and the sand on the seashore.
It's hard to even imagine that many people.
Yeah, and it's interesting because right around this time, Abram's name was changed to Abraham,
Right.
which means father of a multitude. And Sarai became Sarah.
Okay.
And those name changes,
Yeah.
they're like a symbol
Right.
of how serious this promise was.
Or like a huge family, more like a nation, really.
Yeah, exactly. Coming from Abraham.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful, right?
Duh, so powerful.
Yeah.
And what was that third promise?
Oh, the third promise, that was about blessing.
Okay.
God said that through Abraham and his kids, all the people of the earth would be blessed.
Whoa.
Huge promise, right?
It is.
It suggests this like global impact
Yeah.
coming from Abraham's family line.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It is. So these 3 things, right?
Yeah.
The land, the countless descendants, and this world-changing blessing.
Yeah, it sets the stage for everything.
It really does.
That's right.
And then there's that pivotal moment, the birth of Isaac.
Right.
Especially considering how old Abraham and Sarah were.
Yeah, a miracle.
A total miracle.
That's right.
Totally.
I mean, you can't explain it.
Yeah, so Isaac's birth was miraculous.
Abraham was 100 years old.
100.
Sarah was 90.
Right.
And our source really emphasizes this point,
Yeah.
that it happened exactly how God had said it would,
Wow.
even though it seemed impossible.
Hold on.
And this, it showed Abraham that God keeps his promises and strengthened his faith for whatever was next.
Right.
You know, even Isaac's name, it means he laughs.
Right.
And that points back to Abraham and Sarah's initial reaction.
Yeah.
Like, they couldn't believe it.
Totally.
But then it turned to this immense joy.
Right. A miracle child.
Right.
Tangible proof of God's promise.
Exactly.
You would think
Yeah.
after something like that,
Yeah.
things would just be smooth sailing, right?
You'd think so.
But then comes the test.
Yeah.
And this is a request that must have felt like a punch to the gut.
Yeah. After all those promises and the miracle of Isaac's birth,
Mm-hmm.
God decided to test Abraham.
Yeah.
And it was a big test.
It was.
He told Abraham to take Isaac, his only son, the one he loved so much,
Right.
to this place called Moriah
Okay.
and offer him as a burnt offering.
Oh, wow.
And a burnt offering back then,
Yeah.
that was a complete sacrifice,
Right.
completely consumed by fire
Yeah.
as an act of worship and atonement.
It's hard to even fathom that.
It is, and the source really highlights
Yeah.
how hard and how unusual this request was.
Right.
I mean, to ask a father to sacrifice his own child.
It's almost unimaginable.
It's awful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is that Abraham just obeyed.
Right. No hesitation.
Right.
That's a key point. The text says that Abraham got up early the next morning,
Wow.
got his donkey ready,
Right.
took 2 of his young men,
Uh-huh.
Isaac with him, And they left for Mount Moriah.
Right.
3-day journey.
A 3-day journey.
Yeah, and that just adds another layer to the story, you know?
Totally.
Imagine Abraham on that journey.
I can't.
With this huge weight on his shoulders,
Oh.
just thinking, maybe even wrestling with God's command.
Yeah. Right. Those 3 days must have been agonizing.
Oh, absolutely.
And then there's that conversation between Isaac and Abraham during the trip.
That's a big moment.
It is. It is.
So Isaac's carrying the wood for the offering.
Okay.
And he asks his father, hey, the fire's ready and the wood's here, but where's the lamb?
Oh, wow.
And Abraham says, God will provide the lamb,
Right.
my son.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, and you could just feel the weight of those words.
Totally. So much unsaid.
Yeah, was he just trying to protect Isaac?
Right.
Or did he actually believe that God would intervene?
Right. It's hard to know.
Our source talks about this,
Okay.
suggesting that Abraham's faith was so strong,
Yeah.
he was confident God would make sure Isaac was okay,
Right.
and that the covenant would continue, maybe even through resurrection,
Wow.
like the book of Hebrews talks about later.
That's intense.
It's deep, right?
It is. It is.
Really shows you how much Abraham believed.
Yeah. So they get to Mount Moriah, and the tension just builds and builds.
Absolutely.
Abraham builds the altar, puts the wood in place, and then he ties Isaac up and puts him on top of the wood.
Yeah.
This is it.
This is it, the ultimate test of his loyalty and faith.
Can you imagine being Abraham at that point?
I can't even imagine.
The weight of that.
Unbelievable.
So then he's about to do it.
Yeah.
And then,
Just as he's about to sacrifice his son,
yeah.
the angel of the Lord stops him,
Whoa.
calls out, Abraham, Abraham, don't do it.
Right.
Now, I know you fear God because you didn't withhold your son.
What a moment.
Right.
Talk about divine intervention.
Yeah, just in the nick of time.
They must have been so relieved.
Oh, absolutely.
Both of them.
Yeah, overwhelmed, I bet.
But it doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
There's that substitute sacrifice.
Right, so Abraham looks up,
Okay.
and there's a ram
Uh-huh.
caught in a thicket by its horns.
Right.
He takes the ram
Okay.
and offers it as a burnt offering instead of Isaac.
Wow.
And our source points out that this is the first time
Yeah.
we see this idea of substitution in the story.
Right.
One life offered in place of another.
Yeah, a ram instead of Isaac.
Exactly.
And then he names the place, right?
He does. He calls it the Lord will provide.
Right.
Jehovah Jireh.
Yeah, and that name, it's more than just a name.
It is.
It's a statement.
That's powerful, right?
It is. It is.
Showing that God sees us and provides for us,
Yeah.
even when it seems impossible.
Right. Even when it seems impossible.
Especially then, I think.
It's a huge reminder for anyone going through something tough.
It is, and a lasting reminder of God's provision.
Absolutely. And because Abraham was totally obedient,
Yeah.
even to this crazy request,
Right.
God reaffirms the covenant.
That's right.
The promises aren't taken away. They're actually made stronger.
Exactly. Because Abraham didn't withhold his son.
Yeah.
God reaffirmed his promises
Right.
with even more emphasis.
Wow.
He repeated the promise of countless descendants.
Right.
The promise that Abraham's offspring would be victorious.
Yeah.
And that through his offspring, all nations would be blessed.
It's amazing.
It really is. His obedience sealed the deal
Right.
on God's commitment.
So Abraham's faith,
Yeah.
it wasn't just some surface level belief.
No, it was deep, resilient.
Yeah.
It held firm even when everything seemed to be saying the opposite.
Right. And our source talks about how much Abraham understood God's power.
It does. It points to Hebrews 11,
Yeah.
which suggests that Abraham believed God could even bring Isaac back from the dead,
Wow.
if that's what it took
Right.
to fulfill his promises.
Talk about faith.
I know, right?
That's incredible.
Really shows the depth of his belief.
Yeah. And there's also that part where
Yeah.
he tells his servants that he and Isaac will return.
Yeah, that shows he believed it would all work out.
Even in the middle of this trial.
Right. Incredible.
So it wasn't blind obedience.
Oh,
It came from knowing God and trusting him.
exactly.
This test.
Yeah,
It wasn't about God learning about Abraham.
right. That's a good point.
Right.
God already knew Abraham's heart.
Uh-huh.
It was about showing how mature his faith was.
Right. His deep trust in God
Right.
and his loyalty to God above everything else.
Even his love for his son.
Exactly.
And that phrase, fear of God.
Yeah.
Our source explains that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean being afraid.
Right.
It's more about reverence,
Okay.
obedience, trust, loyalty,
Right.
and worship.
Wow, like a complete response to God.
Exactly. That's Abraham.
And that substitute, the ram,
Yeah.
That feels so significant.
It is.
It's more than just saving Isaac in that moment.
That it feels like a foundation.
Yeah, like a foundational idea.
Yeah, the ram taking Isaac's place.
Yeah.
It's crucial, and our source points out that this is the first time in the Bible where we see an innocent life given for another.
Right.
This idea of a substitute sacrifice.
It comes up again and again.
Right.
It's central.
Right. It's like a seed.
Exactly.
That gets planted here.
Right.
Laying the groundwork for future acts of redemption.
That's a great way to put it.
So moving past this event.
Yeah.
The lesson talks about what happens in Abraham's family.
It does.
Starting with Isaac.
So after this test and God reaffirming his promises, we see Isaac and his son Jacob, who was later renamed Israel.
Right, Israel.
Yeah, and Jacob, someone the nations would obey.
Wow.
This is in Genesis 49:20.
Okay.
And it gives us a little glimpse of a future ruler.
Yeah.
And the ongoing fulfillment of those blessings promised to Abraham.
It's like all the pieces of this story are coming together.
They are.
The promises to Abraham, the miracle of Isaac, the test of faith.
Absolutely.
The ram, the family line.
It's all connected.
And even a glimpse of what's to come.
Yeah, so this deep dive into Abraham and Isaac, it shows us a few key things.
Okay.
First, God keeps his promises.
Right.
No matter what.
Absolutely.
Second, we see how strong Abraham's faith was.
Right.
And his willingness to obey.
Even when it was incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And third, we see this idea of divine provision.
Right.
Through a substitute.
That ram in Isaac's place.
Exactly. Jehovah Jireh in action.
It really makes you think.
It does.
So what parts of the story resonate with you?
Yeah.
What do you take away from it?
Good question.
When you're going through tough times, what does this story teach you about trusting in something bigger than yourself? Yeah. And what does it mean to have that unshakable faith in the promises you've been given?
That's what it's all about.
This story leaves us with a big question.
Yeah, how does this idea of an impossible test revealing a deeper faith change how we think about trust when we face uncertainty?
Right.
And how do we understand those long-term implications?
Yeah.
The blessing through Abraham's family and that future ruler from Judah.
It's a story that keeps giving.
It does.
Making us think.
Yeah.
And teaching us about faith.
And God's faithfulness.
Absolutely.
That's powerful.
So powerful.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a great deep dive
into
this amazing story.